focus features are swinging for the fences, especially in 2021. Kevin Jagernauth, a project that was potentially a fatality of the COVID situation, not only resurged and found a whole bunch of different players for this larger ensemble, but landed in the distribution arms of the Focus Features folks. How do you feel about the prospects of this project? What possible future does it have in terms of film festival gala premieres?
So we're talking John Michael McDonagh's The Forgiven, which has Ralph Fiennes and Jessica Chastain. And Focus Features has snapped up notably the worldwide rights, but not North America yet. So that's interesting. It could mean that the film already might have a bigger player within the US. But all that aside, it does give a major boost to this film that was kind of shooting under the radar. But now that it's wrapped, we know that joining Ralph Fiennes and Jessica Chastain are Matt Smith, Christopher Abbott, Abby Lee, and a bunch of other names as well. And it's quite a cast. And it's a pretty exciting prospect for this filmmaker we haven't had anything from in a few years. And I think it's one possibly that, again, as we've said in the past weeks, is a potential candidate for Cannes.
So debuted with The Guard in 2011. I believe that was at Sundance. Cavalry in 2014, and a little blip on the radar a little bit, War on Everyone, that was launched in 2016. So a fairly significant time between his third and fourth feature project. Great cast here. We were griping last week that Jessica Chastain sort of like fell off the, I don't want to call it indie route, but certainly, you know, she had committed herself to larger studio projects. And this seems like not a return to form for her, but something that has a lot more to say, I think. So this is based on a novel by Lawrence Osborne, and it's been a celebrated item in his bookography, if you want to call it that. So there's a lot of things working for this project. What's your sense about what we might see on screen?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's a tale of a wealthy English couple who go to the Moroccan desert for a party. On the way, they accidentally hit someone in the road and kill them. And from there, the sort of evening spirals out of control. So it seems like something very much in McDonagh's wheelhouse. I think we probably can expect a lot of savage dialogue and pointed situations, I think. And I think, you know, Chastain's at her best when she has like really complex material to work with. And I think this is going to be a real, and particularly with Ralph Fiennes co-starring to bounce against, it's going to be a nice dynamic between them, I think.
Yeah, certainly we tend to compare apples with apples in this case. I think a lot about the other McDonagh, again, in Bruges, and that was quite pointed dialogue, like you say. That's a good point. So yeah, it's something that we'll likely see in the 2021 calendar. I believe Cannes might be a bit too early, seeing that the production was just completed. So it really depends on who they've lassoed as the potential distributor for North American. That's going to play a lot in positioning this film either for 21 or 22. Daniel Clowes and Indiewood are back at it again, and this is a surprise, an item that was mentioned very late in the week. And there's a filmmaker on board that I think might actually potentially have a lot to say and might do a good job here. So once again, Focus Features has apparently been on board this project for a while. So it's called Patience. Kevin Jagernauth, I imagine you're familiar with Klaus' work.
Mm-hmm.
Where does this fall in his like in his works, especially the items that have been adapted for the screen?
See, I'm not crazy familiar with his work. What I do know is, the material I know, Ghost World and Art School Confidential, they were very sort of character-driven stories, are very personal, very, as you said, indie wood, like very suited to sort of independent storytelling. This one's interesting in that it has a bit of a science fiction twist. Um, it's about a man whose wife is murdered, and then he learns of a time machine that he might be able to use to go and fix things. And just hearing that, it actually brings to mind Safety Not Guaranteed, oddly enough. And I feel like that vibe from this. I mean, I haven't read the book, I don't know, but just from the log line and the sort of themes it seems to be evoking, I get that sense from it.
Yeah, so the filmmaker is Charlie McDowell. So he's 2 features in so far. Both were broke out at Sundance. For the one I love, that was 2014. 2017, he had The Discovery. That was a Netflix project. Here he reteams with the same scribe in Justin Latter. And again, this is a filmmaker that I feel as if he's tinged in noir and he's able to like sort of play with genre. So something that's perhaps more compact in budget and supported by actual graphic material, if you want to call it that, an actual source might give him a little bit more perimeters. There's going to be more perimeters in place for him. I'm curious about who he might cast in the lead and how he'll approach that whole back and forth chronology in time, going backwards and forwards.
Well, I mean, it was kind of, The Discovery was also a science fiction-esque story, so there's some parallels there, I think, just in the sort of overall, maybe the overall feel of it. And that film had Robert Redford and Jason Segel and Rooney Mara and Jesse Plemons. So, I mean, and with focus behind this film as well, I think we can probably expect some bigger names to join this. But it'll be interesting to see how that comes together and whether this is, an ensemble piece or something more intimate. I mean, just again by the storyline, it seems like something that might be a bit smaller scale in terms of characters and setting and things like that.
I'm thinking a lot of Chad Hartigan made a film in Vancouver in April of this year, a smaller film. And again, I don't know why I'm linking these 2 projects, but it feels like you say something that's perhaps less all-encompassing, but still adheres to some cool escapism, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and it kind of actually it also gives me a vibe of actually a little bit of Eternal Sunshine as well. With the relationship and trying to go back in time and all of that kind of thing. So it'll be interesting to see where it lands in terms of the vibe of it.
The stripper film that won't die, the filmmaker behind Lars and the Real Girl and I, Tonya, and more recently a Disney film, is attached to a project on the Chippendales, but not the angle that we might think. So Dave Patel has been attached to star as the one and only creator of this institution, and it delves back into the 80s and a lot of fierce competition. What do you think about the addition of this filmmaker as the possible visionary behind this project?
I have 2 thoughts about this. First, I'm just excited that Dev Patel is breaking out, deservedly so. So he was just in A Personal History of David Copperfield. He has Green Knight on the horizon, and now this. It just feels like he's really getting the roles that he kind of deserves, these sort of leading roles. And as for Craig Gillespie, I mean, we saw what he did with The True Story of I, Tonya. I really loved that film. I thought he brought a nice energy to it. It was funny and tragic and was all those things. And I think he's a really good choice here. Um, and it's nice because after I, Tonya, he actually went to Disney and made Cruella, the 101 Dalmatians movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then now he's sort of back in his wheelhouse of sort of more indie fare. So I think it's a good combo. I'm curious to see how this will turn out.
This is a really good point about Dave Patel. These are traditionally roles that, I mean, with exclusion of this one, because the owner originally is from, I believe, India. So I mean, physically perhaps look the part to a certain extent. As far as this character, so it's a true story of Soman Banjari. Essentially, it's a rags to riches story. But then there's like this whole competitiveness involved. There's a salacious murder for hire sub story, and like filmmakers have been approaching this project. We had Tony Scott back in 2009, and imagine a plethora of other filmmakers were interested in the film. And it's the producer, David Permit, who did Face Off and Charlie Bartlett and Hacksaw Ridge, like a whole bunch of different film strands in larger indies, micro indie. He's been trying to put this project together for like 2 decades. So I like the link that you make to I, Tonya specifically, because this does feel like a story that could borrow elements from different genres, or at least get some noir humor perhaps in something that normally when you announce the idea of Chippendales, it's kind of like we have this notion of what this film could be. But I think getting into the more heady territory, the more violent territory, perhaps this is something in his wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dimensions to this story, as you mentioned. It's a rags to riches story. There's a bit of murder involved. There's also just the straight up American dream. This is a story of someone who was working at a gas station before he got involved with this club and these exotic dance nights. And I think there's also maybe a potential vibe, a social network vibe, but instead of computer code and websites, it's muscles and I don't know, oil. I don't know what they use, but I think there's that element of it too. So I think you're right. It's going to be a blend of drama and comedy and tragedy, which again, Gillespie kind of hit all that with I, Tonya. So I think this is sort of a hand in glove sort of thing, and it'll be interesting to see. Again, just to go back to Dev Patel, like this is another great role for him to show what he can do, and that's exciting.
Will the real Sam Davis Jr. please stand up? We have a true horse race. We have not one, not two, but 3 projects that tackle actually different aspects of the stand-up comedian entertainer's life. And I find this such an interesting time to profile this person at this juncture in time, but also present 3 different aspects of him. So this week, MGM, the team behind Queen and Slim, and the producers that do a lot of indie work, Bad Education is their last film. Sight Unseen's Julia Lebedev and Eddie Vassman are the producing team behind this project. So let's look a little bit at the angle for this project.
Yeah, so we're talking about, it's actually untitled, but it's going to be based on the memoir, Sammy Davis Jr., My Father. And this is one of a trio of films in the works about Sammy Davis Jr., but this one's going to focus on Sammy Davis in the 60s, trying to put together a showbiz reunion while patching up relationships with people that were fractured along the way. It's an interesting team behind the film. I agree with you. But as we look at the three projects, so we have this one on MGM, we have Paramount has one, which notably they have the music rights to
Mm-hmm.
King Davis Jr. And then there's something over at Netflix, and apparently that one may be the one that films first. So it's a whole bunch of things. It actually reminds me of, for a while, there was a few Jimi Hendrix movies in development, all with different people. And the one that came out first was, I believe, was called All Is True. Didn't have the music rights and actually was not a very good film. So I'm curious how you make this movie with only part of the elements. Where I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it comes together. Um, but yeah, I think each of these projects has a bit of an uphill battle to climb.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. A thought occurred to me is why not cast the same, because there's going to be time between these projects. One is getting ready to go in April. I was thinking, why not use the same actor?
I'm sure that'll be a lot of contractual jumping around that no one wants to deal with. But you're right. I mean, the MGM project set in the '60s. The Paramount one is more of a life story, and the Netflix project is about his relationship with Kim Novak. So yeah, I mean that'd be an interesting approach. Have the same actor tell all these bits of the story, but outside of Kevin Feige, and his way to get Marvel deals in place, I don't know who else could pull it together. But yeah, that would be cool. I mean, that would be interesting. But yeah, these music biopics are always a tricky thing because you either have like a home run, like as we've talked about repeatedly, Bohemian Rhapsody or Rocket Man, where you have the music and everything in place, or you're kind of stuck in this half measure kind of thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, we don't want to go the Velvet Goldmine route.
Unless you're Todd Haynes and you can pull it off.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Fulfilling Kubrick's wishes, do you think Ridley Scott owns the Taschen special edition book set on Napoleon?
Probably. I'm sure every filmmaker of note has it on their shelf.
Well, the first thing I want to tackle is why is the film called Kitbag? And I mean, what does it mean? And why would you go with this is going to be a huge project. What's this all about?
So a kit bag is it's sort of the there's according to the Deadline story, there is a general's staff hidden in every soldier's kit bag. So that's where the name is. I agree. I don't know why you just don't call this Napoleon or Conqueror Man or whatever, but sure, kit bag. It's interesting. I mean, we all know that Kubrick tried forever to get Napoleon made. He couldn't. His version of the project is over at MGM, where Spielberg was kicking it around as a director or producer, and then that sort of never happened. So, my thought on this is fascinating potential subject for a movie. I wish it was anybody but Ridley Scott directing it. He has become. He's a really good filmmaker when he wants to be, but for me he's become essentially Clint Eastwood, where he just gets behind the camera each year, cranks out a film. Doesn't really feel like it could be at its worst. It could be directed by anybody, or every now and then, he'll make something like The Counselor, which is interesting. I didn't particularly like it, but yeah, I kind of wish it was someone else doing this, to be honest.
So he just completed production on The Last Duel. He's hitting up Gucci in March. Mm-hmm. This potentially could be his next project. So that means at 84 years of age, he'll be hitting Napoleon. And of course, it's a big reunion between him and Joaquin Phoenix. What does this mean for Joaquin? And have you given 2 seconds thought as to who's going to play his I think it's Josephine.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting the Joaquin Phoenix angle. It's kind of interesting that he went from being an actor who was sort of had a reputation for being difficult and shying away from sort of blockbustery projects, and now
Mhm.
he's like, I starring in Joker and now doing this. So it's an interesting pivot for Joaquin Phoenix. And to be honest, like I love Joaquin Phoenix, great actor. I think he's fantastic. I don't see him as Napoleon necessarily. Um, yeah, I mean, but then again, we all know how Joaquin Phoenix can transform. So I'm ready to take those to eat my words when this comes out.
Ava DuVernay has had a great association with Netflix through her Array distribution or releasing company. And she's about to embark on a project that comes from nonfiction territory. And she's going to somehow take this material and potentially make um, a fictional feature, a politicized statement, something that speaks to me, something that falls in line with the 13th and Selma. And when they see, she's become this filmmaker that makes impactful, aside from the Disney film Wrinkle in Time, like really important films. And I'm just happy about this association. It's a little bit difficult to sort of like try to evaluate how this project might come across. It's
So Ava DuVernay is adapting the nonfiction book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, and it's essentially a study of racial and economic um, stratification in the U.S. And it uses as sort of a comparison point, at least from what I understand,
mhm.
um, sort of similar situations that have been well documented. And India has a caste system. Nazi Germany had they actually studied the U.S. to sort of set up their horrible systems during their reign. So it kind of sheds a light on the fact that things are not equal in the United States. There is tremendous divide in hierarchies, and you're right. This is right in Ava DuVernay's wheelhouse, and she has become a chronicler of sort of the social, political, and racial situation. The project's coming at a time where the U.S. itself is like deeply divided. We're seeing the rise of like fascists and in a way that I've never seen in my lifetime, like far right, like essentially white supremacists being in public, being covered by the media in a way that's kind of shocking, and their views sort of becoming more, I wouldn't say more mainstream, but certainly more covered by the mainstream. So the project is arriving at a time when I think America really needs a lens shown on itself, and I think Ava DuVernay is the right person for that.
Those are really good points. Big guns in Leonardo DiCaprio, Meryl Streep, Jonah Hill, and Timothee Chalamet. Adam McKay's Don't Look Up. What the hell is happening? This thing is just, there's so many people attached to this Netflix project, and it is a comedy. What the hell is Leonardo DiCaprio doing in a comedy?
Well, Leonardo DiCaprio can be very funny. I mean, as we've seen in Wolf of Wall Street and Django Unchained, he's a pretty funny guy. So yeah, this film, Don't Look Up, just to run down his, we got Leonardo DiCaprio, Meryl Streep, Timothée Chalamet, Jonah Hill, Hamish Patel, Ariana Grande, Kid Cudi, Matthew Perry. I think Rob Riggle's in it as well. No, not Rob Riggle, Rob Morgan. Kate Blanchett. So insane cast. I mean, I'm
Jennifer
sure.
Lawrence.
Yes, yep. Yeah, exactly. I forgot Jennifer Lawrence, unbelievably. So the story is about two astronomers who go on a tour to warn the planet of an impending asteroid. I mean, I think the parallels between, people ignoring scientists about climate change or whatever are very obvious. Um, Honestly, my thought on this film is it can either be totally amazing, but if it misses, it's going to miss huge. That's my feeling on it, because Adam McKay is not a nuanced filmmaker in the slightest. So for me, where The Big Short really worked and I really enjoyed it, Vice was the opposite, where it missed really big for me.
Yeah, we do not want a Cannonball Run where it just features a whole bunch of starlets and stars and makes very little use of them. This is filming in December, so it's it wouldn't be crazy to think that this is going to be already positioned as a December release, something that the AFI Fest could open up with, or could be major clout for a festival like Toronto. Just an interesting project, to say the least, in terms of just the scope and all these players. Is just a little bit nutty that
Yeah.
that they've been able to assemble such a wide cast of names.
It actually reminds me a little bit of Steven Soderbergh's The Laundromat from last year.
Yeah.
Similar sort of like huge cast, kind of jokey movie that touched upon real stuff. And for me, completely was a flat line, like did not work at all.
Also a Netflix project. And
Absolutely.
we'll see. We'll see if a couple of these players do drop out. But essentially, DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence would be top lining the project. That still needs to be confirmed. But we'll be keeping an eye out on Don't Look Up. Take care, folks. I'm Eric Lavallée. I'm editor-in-chief and site owner for IONCINEMA.com. And this is
Kevin Jagernauth, contributing writer for the playlist.
And together we are IndieSponge.